The West. What does that make you think of when I say it? Do you think of the Wild West? Cowboys? Cowboys versus Indians? Or the Gold Rush? Well, that's just some of the many things that happened during the Western Expansion. And if you haven't already guessed, I'm going to be discussing the Western Expansion. And I will not be giving you a short summary. I will be giving you the longest video I have done. This is a special video because it has been 3 months in the making. I have been reading, researching, and watching everything available on the topic of the Western Expansion. However, my primary focus is the US government's politics and actions towards indigenous people, which ranged from removal to outright violence, and even some forms of genocide. However, the indigenous communities are actively resisting through armed conflicts. They demonstrated resilience in the face of systemic oppression, and the legacy of which impacts indigenous people today. Now that you know what we're going to be getting into, I just want to extend my gratitude to my teacher for helping me get through this project. You have been a vital part in my research, spending your time helping me make this all happen. Now, I just want to give you guys some context warnings. I will be talking about murder, genocide, abuse, racism, and depictions of those mentioned earlier. Now that you know what we're going to see, let's dive into the essay of this video. The inhumane approach to the indigenous people living in is what now the United States began long before America was a nation. In his book, A People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn writes, "Not able to enslave the Indians, not able to live with them, the English decide to exterminate them." This foreshadows the approach the American government would eventually take. The Westward Expansion was the event of which over 40 million Americans traveled from the eastern US to the Northwest. Westward Expansion marked the beginning of the Americans' transformation into the global superpower we know as it today. In the 1800s, the US was less than 1 million square miles. By the 1900s, it had turned into 3 million square miles. This is due in part to Thomas Jefferson acquiring the land from the French, formerly known as the Louisiana Purchase. This is the biggest amount of land bought in US history, as the Louisiana Purchase stretched from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains and from Canada to New Orleans, and it doubled the size of the United States. This quote comes from History.com. We can see that there is a vast amount of new, undiscovered land, and that people thought they could start a new life in this land, where they could be new jobs and a possibility for boats to reach the Pacific Ocean, and that was called the Northwest Passage. And this was one of the primary reasons Jefferson purchased the land in the first place. All he had to do was find it, and he knew the right men for the job. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. And these men will go down in history as the first US citizens to explore the new land. Now, you may be wondering why I didn't say the first people to explore the land. That's because they aren't the first. There were already people living there, people with their own culture, language, and religion. And those people were the first people to live there. They were here before the US was a thing, and of course, I'm talking about the Native Americans. Some of the tribes include, and I'm really sorry if I get these wrong, the Chitimacha tribe, the Atakapa, Caddo, Choctaw, Homa, Natchez, Mandan, Sioux, and the Shoshone tribes. And of course, Lewis and Clark did not know what they had gotten themselves into. The Lewis and Clark exploration, also known as the Corps of Discovery exploration, was a mission led by President Thomas Jefferson to send a group of explorers to explore the newly acquired land. The main objective of the exploration was to find the Northwest Passage, but they were also tasked to collect samples of plants and animals, and ultimately to foster relations with the local native tribes. And it was not just Lewis and Clark. The exploration also had about 4 dozen men. Sadly, I can't name them all in this video, but there are 2 other people who were a part of the expedition, and those were Lewis's Newfoundland dog, Seaman, and the one person that I have not named, who was probably the most important person in the whole expedition, a native woman named Sacagawea. She was the reason Lewis and Clark survived the expedition, thanks to her knowledge of the land and the relationships she had with the native tribes. This expedition lasted 2 years, from May 14th, 1804 to September 23rd, 1806. This expedition was over 8,000 miles long, which is truly remarkable. And if you don't know how long that is, here's a picture of their journey. Okay, we're getting too far from the point. But why am I talking about this? The Corp knows that they were going to encounter native tribes, but they didn't know how many. There were about 50 different tribes, so they tried their best to be friendly with each other. Some allowed them to trade, while others were openly hostile, but no violent acts were committed. There was one encounter that was with the Teton Sioux tribe. What happened here was that they tried to make Lewis and Clark pay a toll to get past, but in the end, they did not get what they wanted. At the end of the expedition, Lewis and Clark did not find the Northwest Passage, probably because it isn't even real, but when they returned, they brought back many different plant and animal species. All that can be found in their journals, which I suggest you read. Sadly, that's all the time I have for the Lewis and Clark exploration. But if you want me to go more into this, please let me know. After the Lewis and Clark exploration, a concept began to gain traction known as Manifest Destiny. This was, in the 19th century, belief that the US was divinely destined to expand across the North American continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, and nothing was going to stop them from taking what was theirs. Now, it is time for me to go into the most hateful part of the history. We're going to be talking about Andrew Jackson and his approach to the so-called native problem. And we start with the reservation system, which is still here to this day. What good men would prefer a country covered with forests and ranged by few thousand savages to our extensive republic, studded with cities, towns, and prosperous farms, embellished with all of the improvements which art can devise or industrial execute, occupied by more than 12 million happy people, and filled with all the blessings of liberty, civilization, and religion. These are the words from Andrew Jackson when he was proposing the Indian Removal Act. Andrew Jackson was the 7th president of the U.S., but before he was the president, he was a U.S. Army general. Jackson had already interacted with the native population. He was a general in a campaign against the native Creed tribe. So Jackson already had negative feelings about the natives, because he fought against them, and because they had killed his fellow men. What Jackson was going to do to the natives will take a toll on every single one of them. The Indian Removal Act was passed on May 28, 1830, and it authorized the president to grant land west of the Mississippi in exchange for Indian land within existing state borders. This may sound nice and peaceful, but it was the complete opposite, and because of this, it started what we known as one of the most painful and dangerous journeys that people would have to endure, and this would be called the Trail of Tears. Your fate is decided, and if you do not voluntarily get ready and go by the fixed time in the treaty, you will then be forced from this country by the soldiers of the United States under such circumstances that will be in your condition. Deplorably in the extreme, instead of benefits now presented to you by the treaty of receiving pay for the improvements of your land, your houses, your cornfield, and your ferries, and all the property unjustly taken from you by the white people, and at the same time, blankets, clothing, and provisions for the poor. You will be driven from the country and without a cent to support you on your arrival at your new homes. You will in vain flee from your mountains to protections, like the creeks. You will be hunted up and dragged from your lurking places and hurried to the west. I would ask, are you prepared for such scenes? I trust not. Yet such will be your fate if you present in your present determination. This is a quote from a general threatening the Cherokee tribes if they were to resist the removal from their lands. As history will tell us, the experience of the indigenous people would be horrific, whether or not they are willing to leave their land. The Trail of Tears was an event where many native tribes that had their land taken from them were sent to walk from their homes, their land, to their new home. To their knowledge, they thought they were going to a place that was just as good as their previous homes, but this was far from the truth. This land would be nothing they were promised. This land was dry, hot, and just plain terrible. And the trail there was even worse. The land that was used for reservations was unwanted land. They had almost no transportation beyond some horse-drawn carts. The Trail of Tears resulted in the deaths of more than 10,000 people. Along the way, they starved, they were lied to. They had to deal with the cold, harsh winters with no blankets, after having their homeland forcibly taken. All they had was their families and a spark that will hopefully lead them to reclaiming their land. And this spark would carry on for generations. This spark is a spark of resistance. Some indigenous tribes chose to fight for their land, people, and their way of life through military resistance. The Battle of Little Big Horn was the battle that will go down in history as Custer's last stand. The Battle of Little Big Horn was fought on June 25th, 1876, in Montana Territory. The military battle consisted of federal troops led by Lieutenant General George Armstrong Custer and a band of Lakota Sioux and Cheyenne warriors. Tensions grew between the groups because of the discovery of gold on Native American lands. Also because of the number of tribes missing a federal deadline to move to their reservations. In the words of an unnamed Cheyenne soldier, I am ready to fight. I have fought already. My people have been killed. My horses stolen. I am sacrificed to fight. So, tensions were high between the groups. Because of this, the government dispatched Custer's men to drive them out. However, Custer did not know how many natives he would be fighting, and that would prove to be his greatest error. The group of Native Americans were led by Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, comprised of over 10,000 people. They stayed together in a camp because they knew that they were going to have a fight on their hands. A fight they had. Before the battle happened, Sitting Bull stayed with the women and children to protect them, and Crazy Horse rallied 3,000 natives to fight Custer. As the battle began, Custer charged his men to attack the natives because he thought they were going to have the better hand against them. But when he went over that ridge, he knew that it would be over when his 200 men saw the natives, and that battle only lasted 1 hour. Many of the soldiers fled in a futile attempt to save their lives. This was a significant, if not short-lived, victory for the natives. However, Custer's death and the loss of his troops angered white settlers and U.S. leaders. The U.S. government doubled down on its mission to force all indigenous people into reservations. Within 1 year of the battle, the government took the natives' homeland. They did not receive a single cent. The Wounded Knee Massacre was an event that happened on December 29th, 1890. The Wounded Knee Massacre was a genocide. There's no changing that. The events that unfolded during the 1890s, when the government officially banned the growing religion known as the ghost dance. As part of the crackdown against the ghost dance, soldiers from the 7th U.S. Cavalry Regiment arrested a band of Lakota who were traveling towards Pine Ridge Reservation and confined them to a camp near Wounded Knee Creek. As the military was trying to recover all the weapons that the natives had, during this, a gun went off, and as this happened, soldiers opened fire. When the shooting stopped, hundreds of Lakoan men, women, and children were dead. 300 Lakoan people were killed that day. And you know what happened to the people who massacred those people? They were given the highest commandment, the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Goddamn Honor? Like, are we serious? This is what we give to people for killing people who were just trying to live a good life, people who deserved better, people who survived hate, racism, and all the things in the Book of Hate. Like, it just makes me rethink all I have done on the Western Expansion. Those people killed should have gotten that damn medal, not these murderers. Sorry for the outburst. That just really pissed me off. Now, we just have one more thing to talk about. The legacy of the Western Expansion, and all that has happened in it. The legacy of the Western Expansion sparked my interest in researching it, as my father is a huge fan of Westerns, and I thought that the Western Expansion was about that. But I was very wrong. It is a melting pot of war, hate, exploration, war of culture, genocide, and the government. And people are still affected by this hate and reservations to this day. People are still being targeted by people just because they're native. People think that they have the right to kill, harass, and torment people just because they're a different culture, skin color, and thought to be primitive. That just makes me sick to my stomach, just thinking about it. But one thing we can do is speak out against people trying to say that these events that unfolded during the Western Expansion did not happen, and was necessary for us to get to where we are now. But those people are just wrong. We can fight the people who are trying to erase what happened in this time, and we just need to address more people on this. That is exactly why I want to show you, yes you, that American expansion was not shaped by love and peace, but hate and fear. So, there is one more thing you can do. Be kind to people. Stand up for what you think is right. And all in all, be the person who will fight for a better United States. I just wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It has been a wild ride for me making this video. After all the research and reading, it just is mind-boggling that I can do so much time and turn it all into just a 20-minute video. Like, that is just crazy to me. I mean, this is just something I just really enjoy. Making history videos and writing about them was something I thought to be interesting. And now, I can just do it whenever I want. Because you, the people watching this video, support it. The people watching these videos who enjoy history. People just like me. And just to end this video on a good note, I just want to say thank you very much for spending your time watching this video. And I also want to give another last thanks to my teacher, who helped me create this piece, which I just can't even believe that I did this. This has been a journey for me. Doing all this in the span of 3 months is kind of crazy, at least just for me. So again, thank you for your help, and I hope you enjoyed watching this video.